The air in the hallowed halls of Northwood Preparatory always felt thin, expensive, and faintly scented with old money and fear of imperfection. For years, it had been Amanda Sterling's world, a glittering, predictable existence woven from private jets, hushed tones of staff, and friendships measured in designer labels. But even a golden cage could feel a tremor. A new tremor had arrived, a disruption to the polished surface, and it carried the quiet weight of defiance. It was the unsettling feeling that the world outside the gilded walls was about to press in, bringing with it realities this place was designed to ignore. This wasn't just a story about school. It was about the moment walls begin to crack, and the quiet power of those who live beyond the shine challenges everything the privileged believe. Prepare to see a world turned upside down, one unexpected step at a time. If you believe in the quiet strength of the underdog, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories of unexpected justice and rising from the shadows. Sunlight, filtered through tall, arched windows, illuminated dust motes, dancing in the oppressive stillness of Northwood. Amanda Sterling glided through the senior wing, the crisp fabric of her tailored uniform rustling faintly, a sound as familiar and comforting as her own heartbeat. Every polished surface, every hushed conversation, every meticulously styled head of hair was a reflection of a world she understood intrinsically, a world of effortless superiority and unspoken rules. Her thoughts, like the school itself, were ordered, predictable, focused on the upcoming charity gala and the perfect shade of blush. Her senses were accustomed to the faint, cloying scent of expensive perfume that trailed the popular girls and the resonant echo of her own high heels on the marble floor. Then she saw her, standing near the large oak doors of the main hall, a figure that seemed carved from different wood, painted with different colors than anyone Amanda had ever encountered within these walls. The girl was slight, her dark, tightly coiled hair a stark contrast to the smooth, often straightened, or perfectly waved styles surrounding her. Her skin held the warm, deep tones of a summer evening, touched with an unexpected lightness around her thoughtful eyes. Maya. The name had circulated through the whispered network of the school that morning. The new transfer student. Korean African, a phrase uttered with a curious blend of fascination and confusion by those who valued neat, easily categorized boxes. Maya clutched a simple, worn backpack, its canvas dull compared to the gleaming leather and pristine nylon carried by the other students. There was a quiet stillness about her, a gaze that seemed to absorb everything without betraying a single emotion. She didn't fidget, didn't nervously adjust her simple navy blazer, didn't try to blend in. She just was, utterly and quietly different. Amanda felt a flicker of something she didn't immediately recognize. Not quite curiosity, not quite disdain, but a casual, almost automatic classification. Other. The word formed silently in the well-ordered corridors of her mind, a neat label for this unexpected anomaly in her carefully constructed reality. A faint, unfamiliar scent seemed to emanate from the newcomer, perhaps something spiced and earthy, utterly out of place amidst the clean, sterile air of Northwood. It was a minuscule detail, yet it felt significant, highlighting the vast, unspoken distance between Amanda's world and the one Maya had just stepped from. The tension, subtle yet undeniable, had begun. The worn backpack straps dug slightly into Maya's shoulders as she stepped through the threshold of Northwood High. An unfamiliar scent, a mix of old textbooks, disinfectant, and something vaguely floral, filled her lungs. a sensory marker of a new beginning. Her heart thumped a nervous rhythm against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat accompanying the symphony of distant locker slams and echoing footsteps. Excitement buzzed beneath her skin, a fragile counterpoint to the apprehension that coiled low in her gut. This was it, a fresh start, a chance to navigate different hallways, meet new faces. Yet the sheer scale of the building, the anonymous crowd flowing around her, felt overwhelming. She tightened her grip on the straps, a silent gesture of anchoring herself. Her bicultural background, a vibrant tapestry woven from two distinct worlds, had always been her quiet strength, a source of unique perspective and resilience. She carried the warmth of her mother's heritage and the steadfast practicality of her father's, a duality that had taught her adaptability. Surely, that same students clustered in groups, laughter and animated chatter forming a vibrant, sometimes impenetrable soundscape. She saw the familiar archetypes immediately. The athletes in their letter jackets, the quieter kids huddled near the bulletin boards, and then, there, near the oversized trophy case, a group that radiated an undeniable pull of social gravity. At the center, radiating a cool, almost dismissive confidence, was Amanda. Her hair was perfectly styled, her clothes impeccably chosen, and around her orbited a small constellation of similarly polished individuals whose movements and expressions spoke of shared jokes and effortless belonging. Maya's gaze lingered for just a moment too long. She felt it then. Not a direct stare, but the subtle shift in energy, the almost imperceptible turning of heads within that central cluster. It wasn't hostile, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement of an outsider looking in. A quiet understanding settled over her. She was not part of that orbit. Her attempts to project confidence, to simply observe and perhaps find a friendly face, felt clumsy now. Like trying to blend into a painting that had no room for her colors. She sensed the unspoken rules of this new territory, the invisible lines drawn in the social sand, and she stood clearly outside the dominant circle. The air felt suddenly colder, the initial excitement dimming slightly under the weight of this quiet realization. She was the newcomer, the unknown element, and for now, at least, he was on the periphery. The afternoon sun, usually a source of warmth filtering through the classroom windows, seemed to cast a sudden, cold shadow. Maya approached the cluster of girls near the lockers, a familiar group she'd always felt a part of, a smile already forming on her lips. But as she drew near, a subtle shift occurred. Shoulders nudged closer together. Eyes that had been laughing flicked towards her, then away. The air thickened with an invisible barrier. She paused, the smile faltering, a strange knot tightening in her stomach. This wasn't right. This space, usually open and welcoming, was now closed off. A small fortress built by turning backs and averted gazes. The laughter, which had moments before sounded like music, now took on a brittle, unsettling edge. It dipped lower, became secretive, punctuated by sharp intakes of breath and quickly stifled giggles. Then came the whispers, carried on the slight breeze from the open door, just loud enough to prick at her consciousness. She couldn't quite make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, conspiratorial, edged with something unpleasant, and directed, she knew instinctively, at her. A heat crept up the back of her neck, quickly followed by a chill that spread through her limbs. She felt suddenly clumsy, oversized, exposed. Amanda, standing at the center of the group, turned her head just slightly, her eyes meeting Maya's for a fraction of a second before they slid away. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on her lips. Then, a voice, clear and cutting, despite its low volume, sliced through the space between them.
Oh, look who it is. Thought you were busy with other things.
The words weren't overtly cruel, but the delivery, dripping with false sweetness and underlying disdain, landed like a small, sharp stone. The group around Amanda tittered, a wave of snickers washing over Maya. It was the casualness of it, the effortless dismissal, that stung the most. She wasn't even worth an explanation, just a barbed comment and the collective turning away. The familiar hallway suddenly felt vast and alien. The friendly chatter of other students faded into a dull roar, amplifying the silence around her. She felt acutely alone, an outsider in a place that had always felt like home. Her throat tightened, and a lump formed, heavy and unwelcome. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the linoleum floor and vanish from their sight, from their cruel amusement. The sting lingered, a burning sensation behind her eyes and an ache deep in her chest. This was her first taste of prejudice, not born of hate, perhaps, but of something colder, more indifferent. The casual act of deciding someone didn't belong. Standing there, excluded and exposed, Maya understood with a painful clarity that something fundamental had shifted. The world had just shown her its first crack of cruelty, leaving her isolated and grappling with a newfound, heavy loneliness. The air around Maya thickened with a new kind of pressure. It wasn't just the stares or the occasional snickers anymore. It was the constant hum of conversation that seemed to halt the moment she drew near. Whispers followed her down the hallway like a shadow, twisting simple facts into ugly accusations, painting her in colors she didn't recognize. She heard her name mentioned, always just out of earshot, followed by sharp giggles or disapproving murmurs. It felt as though an invisible net was being woven around her, pulling tighter with every passing hour. Then came the digital assault. Her phone, once a link to friends and shared moments, became a source of dread. Images, innocently captured days before, were posted online with cruel, fabricated captions. Screenshots of private conversations, taken out of context, circulated through group chats she had been silently removed from. The comments below were a relentless tide of mockery, cruel jokes about her appearance, her intelligence, her very existence. The cold light of the screen reflected the sudden, sharp pain in her chest. She felt exposed, vulnerable, every private corner of her life seemingly laid bare for public ridicule. The isolation deepened, seeping from the digital world into the physical one. In the classroom, the seat beside her remained conspicuously empty. If someone accidentally sat there, a pointed look or a subtle nudge from a friend would send them scrambling to another desk. Walking through the crowded halls became an ordeal. People she had smiled at just days ago would suddenly turn their backs, feign intense conversations, or cross the corridor to avoid passing near her. The space around her became a vacuum, cold and echoing with silence, where there had once been warmth and chatter. She felt the chill on her skin, the emptiness a tangible weight. Amanda observed it all. From across the room, down the hall, or through the glowing screen of her own phone, she watched the walls close in around Maya. A slow smile would spread across her face as she saw the effect of the whispers, the digital barbs, the deliberate avoidance. There was a thrill in orchestrating this slow, agonizing withdrawal, a rush of power she hadn't anticipated. With a flick of her finger online, or a carefully placed word to an ally, she could tighten the net, watching Maya flinch and recoil. She reveled in the control, the ease with which she could turn former friends into indifferent strangers, transforming Maya's world into a lonely, hostile place. It was a game, and Amanda felt herself winning. The echoes of her success seemed to bounce off the newly created walls surrounding Maya. The midday hall buzzed with the usual chaotic symphony of lockers slamming, hurried footsteps, and echoing chatter. Maya navigated the throng, her shoulders slightly hunched, hoping to blend into the human tide. She clutched her books tighter, a familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach with every passing face. School hallways were a gauntlet, a place where vulnerabilities felt amplified 1,000 times. Then, a sudden sharp shove from behind sent her stumbling. Before she could regain her balance, a cold, viscous liquid splashed across her back and head, instantly soaking through her thin jacket. A collective gasp rippled through the immediate crowd, quickly followed by stifled giggles that rapidly morphed into outright laughter. A wave of heat flooded Maya's face, not from exertion, but from a searing, immediate shame. She felt something light and airy cascading over her, sticking instantly to the wetness on her clothes and hair. White, fluffy feathers rained down, clinging to her like grotesque, unwanted ornaments. A thick, unpleasant smell of glue filled the air, acrid and embarrassing. She stood frozen in the center of the hallway, a bizarre, feathered spectacle, the laughter echoing around her. Every eye felt like a magnifying glass focused solely on her mortification. Her hands instinctively went up to her head, only to encounter the sticky, feathery mess. Just beyond the ring of pointing fingers and smirking faces, she saw her. Amanda stood slightly apart, leaning against a locker, arms crossed. A small, cruel smile played on her lips, her eyes glinting with a cold, undeniable satisfaction. There was no surprise, no remorse, just the pure, unadulterated pleasure of watching someone else's public agony. A voice cut through the noise, sharp and clear, intended for everyone to hear.
Oops, clumsy me. Looks like someone's trying out for the bird costume in the school play.
More laughter erupted, louder this time, fueled by the malicious wit. Maya's chest tightened, each breath a painful struggle. The humiliation was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the grimy linoleum floor and cease to exist. The stickiness on her skin, the sight of the feathers plastered everywhere, the cruel sound of Amanda's voice, the crushing weight of public mockery. It all pressed down on her, isolating her completely in the midst of the crowd. She was an exhibit, a public failure, and the architect of her misery watched, pleased with her handiwork. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the faces around her into indistinct, jeering masks. The lowest point felt like it had just been reached, and there was nowhere to go but deeper into the mire of despair. The light seemed to drain from Maya's eyes, replaced by a dull, distant gaze. It wasn't a sudden storm, but a slow, persistent erosion, like waves wearing away the shore. Her parents, attuned to the subtle shifts in her spirit, watched with growing alarm as the vibrant energy that once pulsed within her receded, leaving behind a quiet, almost invisible shell. The bullying hadn't just hurt her, it had chased her into a fortress of silence she was building around herself. Schoolwork, once a source of pride, became a chore she approached with heavy shoulders and a sigh that felt too big for her small frame. Grades began to slip, not dramatically at first, but enough to catch the attention of teachers who noted her lack of engagement, the way she stared out the window instead of at the board. The crisp scent of new textbooks and the energetic chatter of the classroom now filled her with dread, each sound a potential trigger for the anxiety that coiled in her stomach. She started finding excuses to miss school events, the vibrant noise and jostling crowds feeling like a physical assault. Sleepovers with friends became a distant memory. Birthday parties were politely declined. The simple act of walking through the school halls, once mundane, now felt like navigating a minefield, her senses on high alert for a sneer, a whisper, a laugh aimed her way. She ate lunch alone in the library, the hushed quiet, a stark contrast to the cafeteria's boisterous energy she once enjoyed. The taste of her sandwich felt like ash in her mouth as she hunched over a book, trying to disappear. The warmth of connection, the easy give and take of friendship, had been replaced by a chilling isolation she couldn't seem to break free from. Her parents tried. Oh, how they tried. They noticed the forced smiles, the way she flinched at sudden noises, the unnatural stillness that settled over her evenings. Dinners were often quiet, punctuated only by their hesitant questions and her monosyllabic replies. Her mother would reach out a hand, wanting to offer comfort, but Maya would subtly shift away, a wall rising between them.
I'm just tired.
She might murmur, her voice thin, avoiding eye contact. Her father would gently probe, asking about her day, about her friends. The warmth in his tone was palpable, a lifeline offered in the darkness. But Maya couldn't grasp it fully. The words caught in her throat, tangled with shame and fear. How could she articulate the constant gnawing dread, the feeling of being utterly alone in a hostile world? How could she explain that the places that used to feel safe, like the school bus or the hallways, were now saturated with the memory of cruelty?
Nothing happened.
She'd whisper, the lie feeling heavy on her tongue, pushing the truth deeper inside. Her parents saw the tip of the iceberg, the withdrawal, the academic slide, the lost friendships. But they couldn't see the crushing weight beneath the surface, the silent screams echoing in her mind, the profound loneliness that had become her constant companion. They knew she was hurting, deeply, but they couldn't reach the core of the pain that was driving her into this suffocating silence, leaving them helpless witnesses to her slow, quiet fading. This retreat wasn't just about avoiding others. It was a desperate attempt to protect a wounded self, even if it meant becoming invisible. The air in the study hummed softly, with the muted sounds of the city outside and the low click of keys beneath Mr. Sterling's fingers. He sat at his large desk, the scent of worn leather and expensive cologne clinging faintly to the air, framed by towering bookshelves filled with volumes he rarely seemed to touch. His gaze was fixed on the glowing screen before him, sharp and focused. A man accustomed to navigating complex systems and making swift decisions. He was busy, always busy, the demands of his world relentless, yet he carried himself with an easy confidence, a veneer of being in control. Amanda hesitated at the threshold, the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders. The vibrant colors that used to define her felt muted, faded by relentless pressure. She watched him for a moment, the man who provided everything, yet seemed to grasp so little of her internal landscape. He finally looked up, a practiced smile softening his features.
Ah, Amanda. Come in, come in. How was school today?
His voice was warm, the tone of a loving father asking the expected question. He leaned back slightly, giving the impression of undivided attention, though his eyes still held a trace of the complex spreadsheets he had just minimized. She stepped forward, the plush rug muffling her footsteps. The brief flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, today would be different, quickly dimmed.
It was. Okay, Dad.
The words felt small, inadequate to convey the tangled knot of fear and frustration coiling in her stomach. She wanted to scream, to explain the subtle cruelties, the isolating whispers, the gnawing fear of tomorrow. But the words caught in her throat, trapped by years of feeling unheard. Mr. Sterling nodded, his smile unwavering. He reached out, patting the air beside him, as if inviting her closer.
Just okay? Anything interesting happen? Big test?
He paused, tapping a finger on the desk.
Remember, effort is key. Just focus on your studies, darling. All that other stuff, the social drama, it sorts itself out eventually. Kids are kids, you know.
He offered a knowing, sympathetic look, the kind parents reserve for what they perceive as minor squabbles or fleeting teenage woes. He genuinely believed he was being supportive, offering sage wisdom drawn from his own distant memories of adolescence. In his mind, Amanda was a slightly sensitive girl, navigating the usual choppy waters of high school friendships. He provided a stable home, paid for everything she needed, and offered these brief moments of paternal advice. He saw himself as present, as caring, completely unaware of the vast, icy chasm that lay between his perception and Amanda's reality. The sheer depth of her quiet suffering, the calculated nature of the cruelty she faced daily, remained invisible to him, hidden behind his busy schedule and his easy, dismissive comfort. He turned back to his screen, the cursor blinking patiently.
Well, if you need anything, just ask. I've got this report to finish before my call.
He gave a final, encouraging smile, already mentally leagues away. Amanda stood there for another moment. The silence of the study amplified, the unspoken words burning behind her eyes. She was his daughter, right there in front of him, yet he looked through her, seeing only a reflection of his own comfortable, uncomplicated world. His perception was a veil, soft and seemingly kind, but utterly obscuring the storm raging within her. The afternoon sun warmed the worn wooden floor of the gymnasium lobby, casting long, lazy shadows. A low murmur filled the air, parents chatting, the cheerful clatter of change at a bake sale table, distant sounds of children laughing from the playground outside. Mr. Sterling, lingering by a display of student artwork, felt a pleasant sense of normalcy settle over him. He admired the vibrant colors, a brief respite from the weight of his responsibilities. He thought of Maya, her quiet strength shining through even in her most vulnerable moments, and felt a familiar pang of protectiveness. He saw her then, near the large double doors, clutching a flyer, her gaze fixed on the floor. A flash of brighter color caught his eye. Amanda was approaching Maya. Mr. Sterling had always found Amanda charming, impeccably polite, a model student by all outward appearances. He had seen her interact with Maya before, and while he hadn't paid close attention, he recalled a general impression of kindness. But something in the set of Maya's shoulders now, a subtle tension he hadn't noticed before, held his attention. Maya looked up as Amanda stopped beside her. He couldn't hear their words over the surrounding din, but he watched their faces. Amanda leaned in slightly, a smile still playing on her lips. Yet her eyes seemed sharper, less warm from this distance. Maya's expression shifted instantly, a fleeting look of pain flickering across her features, before she quickly lowered her head, nodding almost imperceptibly. Her fingers tightened around the flyer, crumpling its edge. Just as swiftly, Amanda straightened, her smile broadening genuinely as she turned to greet a teacher passing by. The transformation was jarring. One moment, the subtle, almost imperceptible interaction with Maya, tinged with something Mr. Sterling couldn't quite name. The next, the picture of grace and sweetness. The air around Maya seemed to grow colder, heavier, even as the cheerful noise continued around them. Maya remained frozen for a moment, her head still bowed, before she slowly, carefully walked away, her back unusually rigid. A strange, unsettling sensation prickled at the back of Mr. Sterling's neck. It was a tiny thing, a micro-expression, a stiffening posture, a swift change in the atmosphere between two students. Yet it felt significant. He remembered other small things now. A brief, anxious glance Maya had cast towards Amanda in the hallway last week. A hesitant pause when Amanda's name came up in casual conversation. Individually, they meant nothing, but seen through the lens of this brief, charged encounter, they suddenly coalesced into a disturbing pattern. His initial positive impression of Amanda, so carefully constructed from polite interactions and glowing reports, suddenly felt fragile. A seed of doubt, small and sharp, had been planted in the fertile ground of his concern for Maya. The cheerful sounds of the lobby faded slightly as he watched Maya disappear through the doors, a new question forming in his mind, chilling him despite the warmth of the afternoon sun. When he finished laying out the irrefutable facts, a long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then came the predictable storm of protest. Her voice, usually sharp with confidence, held a brittle edge of panic. She tried to meet his gaze, but failed, her eyes darting around the room. The air seemed to vibrate with her frantic denial. He remained silent, simply holding the folder, a silent testament to the truth. Her defense shifted, twisting the narrative.
Maya always makes things up. She's overly sensitive. It was just teasing, Dad. You don't understand. She blew it out of proportion.
The blame, swift and cold, landed squarely on the girl she had tormented. The venom in her words, aimed at justifying her actions by tearing down her victim, was a chilling sound. Mr. Sterling felt a physical ache in his chest. This wasn't just a daughter caught in a fib. This was a cold refusal to acknowledge harm, a deep-seated lack of empathy that cut him to the core. The girl he thought he knew was a stranger, cloaked in cruelty and deceit. His disappointment was a crushing weight, heavier than any anger could ever be. The air in the study hung thick and still, heavy with unspoken consequences. Amanda stood before her father, the expensive rug feeling suddenly scratchy beneath her feet, her usual poise beginning to fray at the edges. He didn't shout. His voice was a low, steady current, more unnerving than any yell could ever be. He extended a hand, palm up. When he finished laying out the irrefutable facts, a long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then came the predictable storm of protest. Her voice, usually sharp with confidence, held a brittle edge of panic. She tried to meet his gaze, but failed, her eyes darting around the room. The air seemed to vibrate with her frantic denial. He remained silent, simply holding the folder, a silent testament to the truth. Her defense shifted, twisting the narrative.
Maya always makes things up. She's overly sensitive. It was just teasing, Dad. You don't understand. She blew it out of proportion.
The blame, swift and cold, landed squarely on the girl she had tormented. The venom in her words, aimed at justifying her actions by tearing down her victim, was a chilling sound. Mr. Sterling felt a physical ache in his chest. This wasn't just a daughter caught in a fib. This was a cold refusal to acknowledge harm, a deep-seated lack of empathy that cut him to the core. The girl he thought he knew was a stranger, cloaked in cruelty and deceit. His disappointment was a crushing weight, heavier than any anger could ever be. The air in the study hung thick and still, heavy with unspoken consequences. Amanda stood before her father, the expensive rug feeling suddenly scratchy beneath her feet, her usual poise beginning to fray at the edges. He didn't shout. His voice was a low, steady current, more unnerving than any yell could ever be. He extended a hand, palm up. When he finished laying out the irrefutable facts, a long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then came the predictable storm of protest. Her voice, usually sharp with confidence, held a brittle edge of panic. She tried to meet his gaze, but failed, her eyes darting around the room. The air seemed to vibrate with her frantic denial. He remained silent, simply holding the folder, a silent testament to the truth. Her defense shifted, twisting the narrative.
Maya always makes things up. She's overly sensitive. It was just teasing, Dad. You don't understand. She blew it out of proportion.
The blame, swift and cold, landed squarely on the girl she had tormented. The venom in her words, aimed at justifying her actions by tearing down her victim, was a chilling sound. Mr. Sterling felt a physical ache in his chest. This wasn't just a daughter caught in a fib. This was a cold refusal to acknowledge harm, a deep-seated lack of empathy that cut him to the core. The girl he thought he knew was a stranger, cloaked in cruelty and deceit. His disappointment was a crushing weight, heavier than any anger could ever be. The air in the study hung thick and still, heavy with unspoken consequences. Amanda stood before her father, the expensive rug feeling suddenly scratchy beneath her feet, her usual poise beginning to fray at the edges. He didn't shout. His voice was a low, steady current, more unnerving than any yell could ever be. He extended a hand, palm up.